We got invited to come here after we'd been asked for brochures. And I told my staff, look, you get these requests everywhere and we want to meet them, these requests. So we sent the brochures and then we got a wonderful invitation to come to visit. And so we were coming up here to New Hampshire, and so we just had an opening in the morning. We reached out and we were gladly welcomed. I was on the education committee as a congressman, and I went to school every week. And so I think education is our homeland defense. And so as a military guy, I like to say that. And so I was glad to come here with the youth of America. Well, I decided, because a year ago, it wasn't even on my mind. I was about to take a job, another job, and my daughter's brain cancer that she had 4 years old, which was the initial reason I got into politics, to pay back my country when she was saved with the military health care plan we did. But it came back. It was glioblastoma, the same as Senator Kennedy, Senator McCain had. And only 8% of children beat it. She beat it the first time, and as I stood there, we'd come up to Mass General for the radiation portion of it. And I held her hand at times when she was sleeping because radiation exhausted her. I thought, if she ever makes it into a safe shelter again, I'm going to get back in. And so I did, but for a different reason. And I know I'm a little late, but my ideas are timely. If we don't have a president who can unite this country again, there's no way that will pass the policies needed to move America forward. If we don't have a president that has a breadth and depth of global experience, my 31 years, not just in war and peace in the military, but serving in the White House as President Clinton's Director of Defense Policy, to bring together all the elements of our power as I coordinate the national security strategy, we won't be able to ensure that America's interest become the world's interest of collective good around the world to help expand and safeguard our American dream. I got in because I really do want to serve America again. Policies are absolutely critical, from healthcare all the way to training for a lifetime for those who use their hands and their minds as they lose jobs that they can transition over. But most often, having represented nearly 2-to-1 Republican district, gotten reelected without spending a penny on a campaign ad, where we learned to disagree well. I want to heal this country's soul, coming together, because there's no way we'll meet the defining challenges of our time, Wendy, if we don't become united again. I do not at all. As a matter of fact, the Washington Post editorial has twice said that Democrats are either scared of talking about foreign policy because they don't know very much about it, or they just aren't. And the challenge with that is that it is now one world. Whether it's the damage from climate change, where 85% of the damage of greenhouse emissions comes from nations abroad, not from here alone, or whether it's the contraction of our American dream by an illiberal and authoritarian new world order that's arising, China, as it gives predatory loans to over 70 nations, international organizations, and then to get out of them, they give them naval bases or other types of ceding their sovereignty. Or whether it's our own corporations that now outsource not just our jobs, but our national security to China. Because when you have the technical supply parts for 90% of the mobile phones and computers made there, and for example, Android, that those iPhones now are programmed with Chinese software, and everything you say on it goes back to China for commercial and intelligence purposes, as well as motherboards that Bloomberg has said are embedded with chips that go into servers in Amazon or Apple or Navy Aegis ships. You know that we've outsourced overseas our national security. That is why we have to understand that restoring American leadership to what we once established after World War II, the liberal world order based upon our democratic values, individual and human rights, open and fair governments for the world's collective good that protected our American dream and their interest, we have to restore in order to make sure we handle climate change and a liberal world order of China in a way that doesn't mean we need to use our military, but we ensure that all the nations come together who agree with us and say, we're going to do this right, and we're going to do it together. Otherwise, even the policy we passed here by ourselves won't matter, as those dangers harm them. It was incorrect on how it did it. It takes these scattershot tariffs and tweets some new ones out each day. And then, as a result of that, companies, as the president said would happen, did move out of China because of the tariffs of their goods going up. But they instead didn't come to America. They went to Malaysia, they went to Vietnam, they went to India, where you have to pay more for their goods from coming over there. And then, as I just came from Iowa, the soybean farmers no longer sell soybeans to China. Ukraine does, which took them years to get that market. They're hurting. What the president should have done is what I just mentioned: convene the world, brought together all those nations in the World Trade Organization that we established for unfair trade practices. And China has been breaking the rules. Fix the rules, because it's a very opaque nation, and it's hard to find out that, yep, that company is definitely being subsidized illegally by its government, which is against the rules. Lower the evidence rates requirement because they're being opaque, and then say in 60 days, we all nations agree they're breaking the rules. We all stand together. The European Union, Japan, those nations in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that's like 70% of the world's GDP, and said, China, you want to trade? These are the penalties of tariffs. We all are going to stand by. So you just can't keep moving companies around to avoid things. That's why America's greatest strength is not just its military or its economy, it's our ability to convene the world for the collective good of us and the world. We are coming home, kicking bruised allies, leaving them behind, telling them it's a wrap, when America was great and first when it convened the world, including 67 nations coming together in collective security agreements to win the Third World War of the last century without a shot, the Cold War, and then help the world go from extreme poverty of 63% of the world's population down to 8%. It was the world's collective good that helped us, because we also were then able to have commercial ties that were fair, trade ties that were fair. And now when someone is breaking those rules like China, we don't go it alone. The world together, which doesn't like what China's doing either, is brought together. That's why our president is so wrong to kick our allies, dismiss our allies. The sculpture that's closest to the Oval Office is not of an American. It's of a foreigner, an allied general who won with George Washington in the Battle of Yorktown, General Rochambeau. And he's placed there to remind the president every day, not only did we win our freedom because of an ally, we can maintain our American dream only with our allies. First, it's accountability. In the military, you learn that you are judged not on your word alone, but on the deed that you are assigned to do. Too often in political life, people make promises and don't do the deed. And that's why we've lost trust in America. That's not how we are in the military. You are accountable for the deed. And if you all of a sudden make a mistake, like a captain runs a ship aground, we relieve the captain for costs, even if he was sleeping at the moment at sea and someone made a mistake and rode it aground. Because if anybody believes on that crew that the captain is above accountability, when damage came to the ship or the crew, then they'll lose trust in those who lead. And that's what's happened in the good U.S. ship of state today, of America. Second is the investment this nation has put in me. Over 31 years, abroad and at home, sent me for a doctorate at Harvard University for national security and economics, and then placed me in policy positions, working for General Colin Powell, a superb warrior on the Joint Chiefs of Staff for political military assessments, and then being sent to the White House to work for President Clinton as his Director of Defense Policy, but also in war and in peace, visiting over 80 countries, and going there and understanding that militaries, as I was on the ground in Afghanistan and came out for a short period as head of the Navy Strategic Counterterrorism Unit, said, our military can stop this terrorist problem, but we won't fix it. It'll take the other elements of our power, such as fixing the illiteracy rate of women, which was 98% when I was on the ground there. We do more to fix the global war of terror by doing that than our military now, after 18 years of war, has been courageously trying to stop it. Understanding how the world works is extraordinarily unique. Particularly, there's an absence of it, unfortunately, on the stage of the Democratic Party and definitely on the Republican with the president, as you see how he's kind of scattershotted things around the world, however he feels when he's ready to tweet. I think this is important because the next commander-in-chief with the challenges abroad has to understand military stop problems. We don't fix them. And if you're ever going to be confronted with a situation of using our military, you better know how it's going to end before you make a decision if it's even wise to begin. And you can only do that by understanding the world. It's a perfect example. Much like our military stopped Germany in World War II, we fixed fascism with the Marshall Aid Program because fascism didn't die. There were dire conditions after World War II in Germany, and we finally realized to fix it, we needed to do some economic aid, and now Germany's our greatest of allies. We did the same with Japan. So what we need to do is make sure that what is causing people to come across the border, sure, they're attracted to America, but no. The vast, vast majority are fleeing not just poverty, but violence with their children by gangs or threatened, and other types of violence. A woman who's willing to trek 800 miles carrying a baby, knowing she might be raped, knowing she's alone with this child, could be abandoned and forced from her hands. That type of bravery we want here. But she's doing it not just to come, she's doing it because she has to flee for the greater good of possibly getting a child to a safe area. And so we need to give developmental aid to the Northern Triangle of Central America, those three countries from which they're coming. We've done it before, and one of them particularly where we staunched all that immigration from there. And so we have to do that again. And then those who are here, treat them humanely. Get them out of any detention centers. We have a program called the Mass Strategy Program, where FEMA with the Red Cross is sitting there ready to respond to refugees from hurricanes in America, for example. Use them who know how to treat families and children, to get them into a safe, comfortable place, and then place them with families and volunteers until their right to an asylum hearing proceeds. There's a way to do this. Yes, I want to secure our borders, but I also want to protect our economy. And women, since 1970, have had a birth rate that has not been sufficient to replace those who we unfortunately use every year. If it was not for all types of immigration since 1970, we'd be in a population death spiral, like Japan that has no immigration policy, and our economy would have become like Japan's, stagnant in the last 3 decades because they don't have immigration. And now with baby boomers retiring, it's even more important for us to have a smart, sensible immigration policy, just like my father when he came from abroad. Yes, but what is the right thing to do? Too often, as John F. Kennedy said, too many politicians don't tell people what they need to hear. They tell them what they want to hear. And so how I handle it, and for example, in Iowa, I run in parades. The brochure of mine is passed out ahead, and I run over and said, "That's me, a retired Navy admiral. Take me home tonight and read about me." And 1 out of 4 will say, "Thank you for your service." But sometimes they'll say, "I'm for a wall." Just a quick response. Not mean, just to let you know, with respect, because they see my military service. And I say, I understand that we must protect our borders. And then I repeat to them what I just told you. But did you know that our economy would be plummeting, stagnating if it weren't for immigration? And we must have a sensible policy. And we are Americans that understand that we've signed up to the law, that we will treat people humanely when they come here with the right. I said, but do I agree? We just want to make sure that it's just, yes, but also understand if we don't make a system, including for the undocumented, who are absolutely necessary today, even today, because we don't have enough people with this unemployment and others to take care of the jobs. Get them in line, background checks, do that, and see if there's any fines, whatever. But we need immigration to move forward. And so I don't talk disrespectfully to them, but I just remind them that, yes, you're right, Americans have a psychic desire, need, understandably, to protect the borders, but understand that we want them, we need immigrants to have our economy get booming. I would say we might have a bit more emphasis on it. I really would. I think there are, I can only say this based upon going to a school every week when I was in education department, that I know my daughter goes to a public school, went to a public school, she just graduated. She had to finish the courses online because of her brain cancer coming back. I think 18% were white. It's a demographic change time. They do a pretty darn good job. But I've also been to other schools where I feel as though this issue of civics needs to be brought more forward. And I say that today than before, even more today than before, because of the lack of good civics in America's leadership. When you have someone that can speak with incendiary language, that actually perhaps people feel emboldened to act on dark impulses, such as ways you characterize those that might come from the Muslim world or the Hispanic world, as though they're not wanted, as though they're a different type. That is like the captain of a ship. When I actually volunteered to have women on a combat ship as kind of a test bed, that if I had said, well, we're getting women on ships, as compared to, we're going to be a better Navy because we want the best of all demographics, the tone of civics, the tone of the ship changes. So I think because of the reason I'm getting in, to bring the nation together, not divide it, that as students over these past years have watched a different approach by our commander-in-chief, by our president, it's needed more today than ever. After all, everything evolves from the founding of the Declaration of Independence, where it said, imperfectly, because it only said men, all men are created equal. And that's the foundation of everything. George Washington, I really do. I read his biography a couple years ago because I said, I know the other presidents, I've read of them, but I never sat down and read his biography. We know the stories from, chopping down the tree and all that, and I knew what a warrior he was. But as I read the part about how he served in government, he was selfless, he was for people, sleeping with his enlisted men in his cloak on the ground. And as his aides came to wake him up to go back to the shelter he had, he said, no, I'm sleeping here with the men. To where he went to all the 13 colonies. He was sick and ill when he did it, but he said, I need to go out to all the colonies, because at the time, particularly in the South, there was some difference of opinion as he tried to set up the National Bank, but went and spoke with them about it. I think some may think it's too easy to say George Washington, but when you go back and look, that man really was for the Americans above himself, certainly above party, and certainly above any special interest. And it came at a great cost to him, where he really did just want to be at Mount Vernon in his last years, but he served as president and didn't seek it. It was sought him. I think what we need to do is actually have someone who is as comfortable walking into, as I will do of one of 6 things I want to do my first 48 hours, because it will take it from having an open town hall in the middle of America to visiting a mosque to walking to an NRA show and letting people know then, just by presence and by speaking, that those who want to have a gun for hunting, that those who feel for security, like the Heller decision said in the Supreme Court, they have a right to that. It's understandable, and I respect you as Americans. But I also want to say to them, but that doesn't mean that the assault weapons that you see on my website, where I was with, as an admiral, I would go on ships and board them looking for contraband, because I like to go out with the troops, so to speak, and we climb up 150 feet of rope ladders as others were standing back here like this in the sea, that those were needed there, but they're not needed on the streets of America. For what? The hunting or you want security. But I want them to know that I don't do this in a way of looking at you any different. I'm from Pennsylvania, and when I was captain of a ship, I invited anyone who had a gun, wanted to do his hunting, so to speak. They bring it on board. And in the Persian Gulf, I tow a sled, a wooden sled we made with a silhouette of a deer. And on Sunday afternoon, we'd have what I called Steel Beach. And it was a steel deck. We'd stop flight ops, and we'd let everybody barbecue out there, and let everybody take out their gun and enjoy what they could have at home as much as we could. But I want them to know that there is a sensible type of approach of background checks, of closing gun show loopholes, of gun kit loopholes. And we need to be about that, because our children need to feel more secure. I know my daughter twice had to go into lockdown because they were worried about it. Does it scar them a bit? Yeah, it does. And I think the vast majority of gun owners agree with that. That's why I have an F from the NRA, which started as a wonderful organization to train and teach people how to use gun safety, but involved, unfortunately, as too many groups are down there, a special interest group. I want to talk to the gun owners. They're the ones that I think believe very much like I do in sensible gun control. But my very first one again is we must have a president who cannot just be Donald Trump, but can actually heal this country's soul. Someone who can unite us and has demonstrated the ability to do it in nearly 2-to-1 Republican districts, but also stood up to his party when it was wrong to accept Senator Arlen Specter, Republican turned Democrat, who had tried to humiliate Anita Hill when she had brought her sexual harassment claims against now Supreme Court Clarence Thomas, and was willing to be accountable. And that meant even at a cost. But that's what matters in accountability, doing what's right when it matters, even if it has consequences. I gained respect from Democrats, Republicans alike, because of that's how I believe a politician should be, a public servant to people, but party above self, above any special interest. And then, if you can unite this country, then you can focus on what's absolutely needed, education, our homeland defense. And that means making sure that everyone is able to have that paid for, at least through 4 years old, the early training, get them when they're young, Head Start, pre-Head Start, getting them into early education, and then through the public schools, and then into whether they go to college, making sure that they're affordable loans, as I described earlier, that they never pay back more than about 5%. It's 10% today in the repay program, but never more, I'll lower it to 5% of their loans of what percentage of their income. But training for a lifetime, for those who use their hands and their minds, that if you lose your job, you have the opportunity, public-private venture, to be retrained for a higher skill. Lose the coal mining job, you get into green manufacturing. And then affordable care of health care. We must move towards a sensible approach, a transition of choice, not a sudden mandate that moves us eventually to removing the healthcare companies, which is an unnecessary middleman. You can go to most of the fishing ports here in New England, and almost all of them have a fishing cooperative, where the fishermen come together and they sell directly to the markets of everywhere in Boston or New York, the fish. They bypass the middleman. We need to do the same thing for the insurance company. There's no necessity for them, but just don't change tomorrow, or you'll throw 255 million people who are in some form of health insurance out of their health insurance, like me when my daughter was going through brain cancer. And then small businesses. We only have half as many small businesses being created today as we had 30 years ago for every 10,000 working Americans. They create 70% of all jobs. If we can get them, instead of 18 for 10,000 Americans, to get them to 36 where they used to be, get that star running back of job creation on the football field for not just the first half of the game, 18 minutes, but 36 minutes, 36 jobs, new small businesses for every 10,000 Americans. Think of the job opportunity. Wow, we'll have people saying, we need more people, the wages are going up, and then all of a sudden it's a win-win for everyone. I do have a comment overall on this issue.
Yeah.
Public access is priceless. When you see the increasing monopolization of the media industry, and I don't care if it's on Facebook or whether it's the radios all coming together and people going up to have fair, objective access to information, is absolutely, I think, a citizen's duty to support that with the more than adequate funding to make that happen. And today, where we are segmenting our nation into whether you watch MSNBC or Fox, and then that's all you do, to have someone who sits there and gives access, not just for a 30-second soundbite, not just to where all of a sudden everybody's asked for a 30-second, 15-second, do you all believe in Medicare for all? But you can actually sit down here and discuss issues. You can actually get the cut of one's jib, so to speak, through public access. It's priceless. When we heard you were coming today to this event, we were, and I don't say this lightly, ecstatic. I mean, we think that every single opportunity you can have to speak is it. But to have this type of interchange to where people can say, okay, I heard what he really believes, it has to be done. No. That, as well as what they're trying to do on the internet and other things, has to change. I believe that because I've seen it. I mean, to go on public access, I do it all the time, and there's various types of public access. There's some that are so small and tiny, but I go on them in Wayne, in a small little community we had, all the time.